Well, this week we're talking about finding confidence in the middle of a mess. And I was reminding you that Psalm 16 was written by David, and he sure was in the middle of a mess. He'd been anointed king, but he wasn't yet king. In fact, he was running for his life. And he instructs us how we can find confidence in the middle of a mess. You know, day one we talked about we have to choose to take refuge. You have to decide to get under God's umbrella in your mess. And the second day we talked about no plan B, that we actually need to fully trust God and not ourselves or others, but put our full trust in God. And then yesterday I talked to you about hanging out with people who also trust God. And today we're going to talk about your middle has actually been entrusted to you. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, let me read to you from Psalm 16, verse 5. Verse 4, Lord, you alone are my portion and my cup, you make my lot secure. The boundary lines have fallen for me in pleasant places. You know, what does this mean? Well, David is reminding us that God decides our middle. He actually entrusts things to us. Do you own property? I have a lot, and I know the boundary lines of my lot. I know how big it is, how wide it is, and I know every part that's in that lot. I know where the grass is mushy and weedy, and I know where there's rocks and hills, and where the soil isn't so great, and where there's a little river running. We know what's on our property, and we've been entrusted our property, and our assignment actually is just like given a piece of land. We need to harvest all of the property that we've been given, and this includes the messes in the middle, that God entrusts them to us. We're not to look at other people's property and say, the grass is greener, but isn't that the tendency? The grass is greener always on someone else's land. But actually, we're to consider the mess that we're in, just like David did, to say, God has actually entrusted this to me. He's actually asking me to be a good steward of it. What does that mean? Well, you know, in the mess of our life, when our kids were running from the Lord, I actually found comfort in the book of Job when Job says, you know, shall we accept good from God and not trouble? I mean, we're guaranteed trouble in this life, and yet whatever God puts in our field, puts in our property, He's given permission to. And how might we steward it as one who is entrusted to it? Job 1:7-8 says, when Satan walks into the throne room of God and God says, have you considered my servant Job? You know, there was a day when I filled my name in there. Have you considered my servant Lorie? Like, did God actually say that one day, that Satan, I'm going to give you permission to test. I'm going to give you permission to this family to go on this difficult journey, because God was entrusting that to me. And you know what? As I received it as something that was actually given permission by God, it changed my attitude in the middle of the mess. I actually learned then to consider how I might be a good steward of the mess that we were in, and in that started looking and learning into Scripture and sharing what I was learning in the middle of the mess as a steward, as being entrusted in the mess that God had given me. So, you know, what's the middle for you? What is the mess that God has actually entrusted to you? What will you do with that mess? Will you, in fact, you know, cultivate it and steward it in a way that for your good and for His glory? Because that's what it means to accept what God has given us in the middle and to be entrusted with it. God bless you today.